Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'll be showing you how to make my favorite Oreo cheesecake. Hey Sugar Spun Bakers, Sam here, and today I am so excited to be sharing another carefully tested, well-researched, and perfected recipe. Today we are making my incredibly rich, decadent Oreo cheesecake baked in the oven with no water bath. I'm so excited for you to try this one, so let's go ahead and get started. Now the first thing that you want to do is get your oven preheated to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, we are going to make our Oreo cookie crust. Now for the crust, you're going to need 35 Oreos. You're also going to need another 15 Oreos for your filling. Now this makes a few more Oreos than you get in a standard sized package of those cookies, so you're gonna wanna grab yourself a family or a party size bag. For now though, we're just working with 35 Oreos. Now, I shared this recipe a couple years ago, and one problem that people kept running into was that their Oreo crust was leaking in their oven. And it took a lot of trial and error to figure out exactly what the problem was, but it turns out the cream inside the Oreo actually tends to seep out of the springform pan while it's baking. In order to eliminate this problem, we are going to eliminate the Oreo cream just from these 35 that are going into our crust. Now to do this, just twist your Oreos apart. Twisting them just helps the cream to come out more cleanly, so you only have to scrape one side typically. And we're going to reserve the cookie itself. Just gonna scrape off the cream, toss the other cookie in a bowl, and just repeat until you have scraped all 35 of these cookies. Now the excess cream you do not need for this recipe. I didn't really care for it stirred into the cheesecake or anything like that, so we're just simply going to be discarding this. Pretty sure it's mostly vegetable shortening anyway. Now these cookies need to be ground finely into crumbs. I like to use my food processor to do this, so I'm just gonna drop all of my cookie halves in here, and we are just going to briefly or repeatedly pulse them until we have nothing but fine crumbs remaining. All right, let's take a look. This looks pretty good. We don't have any large cookie pieces remaining. So the next thing we need for our crust is 5 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter. I'm just gonna take my cookie crumbs and add them right into the bowl with my butter. And I'm just going to stir everything together, kind of tossing the crumbs and the butter together until all of the crumbs are at least slightly moistened by the butter. You don't want to see any dry crumbs remaining. Now we're going to be baking today's recipe in a 9-inch springform pan. I'll go ahead and link to the one that I use in the description. And we're just going to add all the crumbs in here, and we are going to press them evenly into the bottom of the pan and up the sides. Now I like to use a small glass to do this, and you just want a nice firm even layer. Now, one trick when making cheesecake is you want to go ahead and work that crust as far up the sides of the pan as you possibly can. Don't drive yourself crazy if you can't get it all the way to the lip of the pan, but just go up as high as you can. Switch over to a larger glass. Sometimes that helps. Okay, so if you can see this, I don't have it all the way up to the top, but it's pretty high, and I'm hoping that this will be higher than the top of my cheesecake batter once I pour it into the pan. All right, now set this aside and now grab those other 15 Oreo cookies that I told you about earlier. Now you can see I have not removed the filling from these, and I just have them in a large Ziploc bag. What we're gonna do is we're just going to gently crush them. I like to use a rolling pin, and we're just gonna smack them a couple times until all the cookies are nicely broken. You don't wanna totally pulverize the cookies. You wanna have discernible pieces of Oreo in basically every bite of your cheesecake, so don't overdo it. All right, this is looking pretty good. I should have said, make sure you zipper your bag before you break the Oreos. That can save you from a mess. Looks like we got lucky today. But anyway, you can see these cookies are looking pretty good, nicely broken up, not too small, not too big. So we'll set those aside. Next, we'll grab ourselves a large mixing bowl. And in this mixing bowl, we are going to combine 4 8-ounce packages of cream cheese. So it's really 32 ounces of cream cheese total. And I recommend using this brick style cream cheese, full fat, that I'm using today for best results. And I didn't mention this, but you do want to make sure you're using softened cream cheese. Mine's been sitting out at room temperature for about 2 hours before I started this. And we're going to add 1 cup of granulated sugar. Today's recipe can absolutely be made in your stand mixer with no alterations needed, but today we are going to be using our handy dandy electric hand mixer. Now we'll cream together the butter and the sugar until everything is nice and smooth. Now with cheesecake, you do want to take care that you don't overmix it, so I'm keeping my speed pretty low here just because I don't want to beat too much air into the cheesecake. That can make it rise a lot in the oven and then sink back in on itself. Now this is looking pretty good. I do like to pause periodically and scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl because I want to make sure that there are no lumps of cream cheese hiding in there. All right, the next thing that you need for today's recipe is 3/4 cup of sour cream and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and we'll stir these into the batter as well. All right, next you need 4 large eggs. Preferably these should be at room temperature, and we're going to be adding them one at a time to the cheesecake. Now I like to lightly beat each egg with a fork before I add it to the batter because again, you don't want to overmix the cheesecake batter. It can make it more prone to cracking while it's in the oven, and it can again kind of mess with the texture and make it rise too much. So we're just going to add one egg at a time and beat until just combined after each addition. After the first 2 eggs, I like to pause and scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl again. Right, and we'll add the next 2. And then again, I like to scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl. We want a nice lump-free, well-incorporated or well-combined cheesecake. All right, now let's grab those Oreo cookies that we broke up earlier, and we're just gonna add them into the batter. And at this point, I just use my spatula to fold these in because I don't wanna overdo it with the mixer. This is looking pretty good, so now we'll grab our springform pan that has our cookie crust in it. This crust has not been baked, it's just been sitting there after we pressed all the crumbs into it. And we'll go ahead and pour our cheesecake batter into our springform pan. Now you can see some parts of my cheesecake are slightly higher than some parts of my crust. I'll show you what to do about that once the cheesecake comes out of the oven. All right, now let's take this over to our 325-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven where it's going to need to bake for about 50 to 60 minutes. When the cheesecake is finished baking, you may notice some very small cracks around the edge of the crust. They should be very small, there shouldn't be any big cracks. And if you jostle the cheesecake gently, it'll jiggle a little bit in the center, but it shouldn't be super jiggly or it shouldn't appear super liquid under the surface. All right, now if you recall, we had a couple spots where the cheesecake was a little higher than the crust. What I like to do is just grab a sharp knife, and then I'm just going to carefully use my knife to separate the cheesecake from the pan. I'm just kind of loosening it. This is going to help prevent any large glaring cracks because that crust is going to want to shrink as the cheesecake cools. Anywhere where the cheesecake is touching the pan, it's going to try to stick to the sides of the pan, and then that tension can cause cracks. So we're just going to release the cheesecake and release any possible tension. So once your cheesecake is finished baking, we're going to let it sit at room temperature for about an hour until it's no longer super warm to the touch. Then you're going to want to pop it in the fridge and let it chill for at least 6 hours, preferably overnight before you proceed with this recipe and certainly before you serve the cheesecake. Now, fortunately, I do have a cheesecake I prepared yesterday, so we can go ahead and continue. Now, any toppings at all are completely optional, but I love to top this cheesecake off with a nice rich chocolate ganache. Now, this is super simple to make, and to make it, we're first going to grab ourselves 3 ounces of chocolate, and I have this measured out in a heat-proof mixing bowl. If you're using a baking bar, just make sure to finely chop the chocolate before you place it in your bowl. Now, in a small saucepan, we're just going to bring a half cup of heavy cream to a simmer, and then just pour that over the chocolate. Make sure you pour it nicely and evenly as you can so that all of the chocolate's got a little bit of the cream on it. I'm gonna cover this with foil and let it sit for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, grab yourself a whisk and we'll remove the foil and just gently begin whisking from the center until the chocolate and cream are completely incorporated and you have a nice smooth ganache. Just gonna use a spatula to scrape the sides, make sure it's all completely smooth, and then we can go ahead and pour this over our cheesecake. I'm just going to use an offset spatula to sort of to even that out a little bit. Now I like to pop the cheesecake in the fridge for a couple minutes so the ganache begins to set, and then before I serve it, I like to top it with a little bit of homemade whipped cream. Today I have a half batch of my homemade whipped cream. I'll make sure to link to this recipe in the description, and I just have it in a piping bag fitted with an Ateco 848 tip. I'm just going to decorate the top. All right, now is my favorite part. We can go ahead and dig in. And that is how you make my favorite creamy, amazingly decadent Oreo cheesecake. I really hope you guys try this one out, and when you do, please leave me a comment and let me know what you think. I always love hearing from you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. So good.